All right. Good morning, everybody. Or if you're seeing this at night, good evening. I am here today with none other than Matthew Foley, a new friend of mine and also known as a spiritual life coach, meditation teacher, poet, and podcast host of A Path to Call Your Own. Recently, I've been doing some coaching with you, which has been super rewarding.
It's been awesome, man.
Just in the couple weeks so far, I'm picking up some tips and dropping a bit deeper on my journey. So thank you. And I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And you're welcome. And yes, all of it. And it's awesome to be here. And yeah, man. Yeah. It has been such a pleasure getting to know you over the last few months. And yeah, as you were on my podcast about a week ago, and yeah, we've been doing some coaching work. So believe me, man, I've been getting just as much out of this journey together as you've been. So yeah, it's an honor, my man. It's an honor to be here today.
So tell anyone listening about, you have a new course you're about to drop and release, Finding Purpose.
Yeah.
Give us a little framework on what that's all about.
Yeah, that's probably the big offering that's coming up pretty soon for me. I'm always offering one-on-one coaching. I have a meditation group that meets online on Monday nights. But yes, this online course called Finding Purpose is sort of the next big thing on the horizon. It's the second time that I've offered it. Switching a few things up about it, again, I learned a lot from the process the first time, but yeah, just quick details. Yeah, it's going to start August 23rd, so a little less than a month, and it's a deep process where we bring a good number of participants together. Last time we had about 6. I'm kind of hoping for maybe 8 to 10 this time, to really dive deep and explore together, what does it mean to have a deep sense of purpose in life, and then to fully live that purpose in a way that's sustainable for you, that yes, you could make money doing it. You could have a full livelihood and pay all your bills doing what you love. And I feel like that feels like such an impossibility for a lot of people. I know when I was much younger, I felt like that was, a choice I had to make between, okay, here's what I could do what I love over here, and the sacrifice would be being broke, or, I could sign up for this working world and an office, or, whatever it might be. And that's how I can make money, but I'll be disconnected from my soul's purpose. And one of my missions, I have a lot of missions in life, but one of my missions is to empower people, give them the vision and the tools to realize that they can do what they love, they can serve the world with it, and they can support themselves in the process. And, not just get by, but really live an abundant, full life, again, of service, connected to your passion. All of those things are possible. So that's really the mission of the course. And we go into a lot of cool, guided meditations and visualizations and conversations and all kinds of cool stuff. But that's really the heart of it, for sure, is finding that purpose and living it in the world in a sustainable way. Yeah.
Whoa. So I know recently you turned 35, and I know age is just a number. And I remember you shared a really awesome post, a longer post on Facebook, is beautiful, well-written prose. And you were reflecting back, and I came across in there, you said you were 25 at this point in time where you went camping in Montana to reevaluate. And is that a story you'd feel like touching on real quick? Because I thought that was so fascinating. It gave me chills when I read it. And I haven't heard you share kind of
Oh man, yeah.
That little moment.
I
seemed
would,
profound.
I would be honored, and yeah, it really actually does touch this theme of how we find our purpose, and how what's tricky is that we can get a big glimpse of what we're supposed to be doing in our life. We can get a big glimpse of truth, and then we can get scared off from living it. And so that the story is a very powerful story, but unfortunately, if it has, well, it has a very happy ending ultimately, but it had sort of a sad transition in that, So when I was 25, I with my partner at the time, we took a big road trip across the U.S. Ended up staying in the Montana area, Yellowstone area for about a month or so, and there was about a week of it where my partner had to fly home for a wedding. We didn't really have enough money at the time for both of us to afford plane tickets, so she went home for this wedding, and I had just really an entire week to myself. And I decided I'm just going to spend this time alone in the woods, figuring out my life. I was, like I said, 25 at the time. Definitely had the seeds, maybe even like the buds of like insight around like what I really saw as my purpose in life, but still felt a lot of confusion around that. And, I knew it had something to do with spirituality. I knew it had something to do with writing. I knew it had to do something with nature and being connected to the earth. But like, how do all those fit together? How do you make money doing any of that? And there was one day on that week out in the wilderness of Montana where I hiked up to this mountain nearby, and on the walk up, I was just reviewing in my head again, just like those core themes of like, okay, and I feel this deep connection to spirit. I know I'm a spiritual seeker. I want to reach other spiritual seekers. I'm a writer. I love poetry. But how do I pull this all together? And is this all right? Is even just doubting myself. So I got up to the top of this mountain, and there was this huge boulder up at the top. So I climbed up even on that, sat in meditation, and I began to pray. And I should kind of say that for a lot of years up to this point, I was very much more of a Buddhist in my orientation. So I love to meditate, but in terms of going like, dear God, praying, that's not really what I did,
Gotcha.
I was raised in the Christian church. So I was, I spent a childhood with those kind of like, please God kind of moments, but I really hadn't gone to that space in a while. But in this moment, that's what Spirit was calling me to do. And and when I was up there, I felt like a very strong presence of just a very sacred presence of the earth, of something bigger than even that. And I just spoke to it, and my main thing was, I just said, I kind of said out loud all these things. I think this is what my life is about. Again, spirituality, writing, teaching others, helping others. And I literally just said, God, if I'm on the right track, could you give me a sign? And I'm not over exaggerating. Within about a minute, I've heard this big just clap of thunder go off in the sky behind me. And up until this point, it was really just blue skies, looked like a really nice day. Huge just boom of thunder behind me. And then within about another 60 seconds, it was just pouring rain. The weather changed on a dime. And I literally just like floated down the mountain back to my campsite, just feeling as if, God had just given me that sign, Now, there is like my mother and stepfather are both biology teachers. I have a scientific part of my brain. And there is a part of me that's that little voice that says, maybe that was just in the weather forecast that day. Maybe it was just a natural occurrence that it was meant to rain in that moment. But even if it was, it felt to me, my internal sense of it was that I made a connection to something bigger, even if it was just the earth, even if it was just me having this profound appreciation for the earth's beauty and the beauty of rain and all of it, even if it was just that, that is a miraculous moment. Mm-hmm. But I felt in my heart of hearts that something much deeper or much higher, or however you want to think about it, was speaking to me and confirming that that I was on the right track, and I was meant to devote my life to spirit and poetry and serving others through kind of spiritual teaching and guidance. The tricky part is that it took me about another decade to really get there.
Yes. So that led to a few different things with teaching and.
Yeah. I'll say really the first tricky moment of already struggling to sort of bring this vision into the world is my girlfriend came back from her trip a few days later. Mm-hmm. And, this is where it gets really tricky. And this is why it's very important that we pick mindfully our partners and the people around us. My girlfriend came back and I could not wait to tell her about this incredible thing that had happened to me. And we sat down to dinner and I told her the whole story, and she, kind of took it in and then was like, kind of looked at the menu and was like, so yeah, what do you want? You want to get an appetizer? It just totally blew right past her. Mm. And I think that was actually the beginning of me. Oh, maybe that was just this weird thing that happened to me. Mm. Maybe it wasn't that significant. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe, whatever. And so that was kind of the beginning. I'm sad to say of kind of beginning to doubt that. And it still took me a long time to work up the courage to really make this my reality, I ended up marrying that girl and, had a whole life as a public school teacher that wasn't quite aligned. And so, but I'm so blessed to really feel in the space now that I'm where I'm supposed to be and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And there's really no better feeling than that. Yeah.
Wow. I'm sure it's not just me that can relate to you on the moment of sharing something out of excitement, especially a profound little glimpse moment like that with somebody, and then not maybe receiving the response you were hoping for. Having that expectation of them to equally meet you with excitement. And you're like, oh man. So what sort of helped you, when did that circle back to have another glimpse of oh wait, I'm not quite on track with the teaching career and maybe this particular relationship. And now I'm going to start to head back towards, did you remember that moment out in the mountain, 5 years later? And you're like, know what? There was something going on there.
I held on to that memory very strongly for consistently. I remember I actually that day I wrote a poem about it, and it would continue to show up in my writing. It would be something that just in my own, almost in my own personal mythology of my life, it always felt like this real peak. I judge it to be, I had a mystical experience, and I, to this day, I count that moment as probably in the top 5 most profound moments of my life. So I never forgot it, but there were just times that, unfortunately I really put it on the back burner, and and I would love to say that it was a smooth, gentle process of realizing that the life that I had been living during some of those years was not really what I was supposed to be doing. But Unfortunately, the way life works, sometimes we have to suffer a whole lot before we wake up. And it definitely took me going through a divorce, and leaving teaching was very difficult. I taught like middle and high school English for 5 years, and that was tough leaving. I mean, that was not just like leaving. That was like my secure job, like I felt like if I wanted it to, that's a job that could carry me on through to retirement. I could just safely spend my life as a public school teacher, not making tons of money, maybe not super happy, but it would be safe. And it really just took my last year teaching. Unfortunately, I was just really sad the whole time. Really had some good moments. I had some great students that year, students I still stay in touch with, but my well was empty, and it wasn't being filled up by the way I was living my life. So, within about a 2-year process, marriage ended, the teaching career ended, and I had to decide what's next. But it sometimes it takes those kinds of rock bottom moments where we have no choice but to start over. And, I definitely hit the reset button at that time, probably hit it a few times actually since then. But no, it was not a gentle process. It definitely, life had to kick my ass a little bit more before I decided to really make a big change.
Mm-hmm. So like what lesson or lessons, little takeaways from that previous chapter, like coming out of it and then really starting to take steps back more into a new version of your alignment, heading more in the direction of coherence and getting more back in touch with yourself. Like, I guess what comes to mind is something you may have learned, like, or what advice would you give to yourself now if you saw someone in a similar position where they're just not quite in the right spot, but like, come on, get up, keep it moving.
Well, I look back now and I see that, when I was 25, 26, 27, I was holding on to several really crucial limiting beliefs. Beliefs. I was talking with a group of guys the other night, and we the topic of addiction came up, and we were talking pretty honestly about things that we've struggled in our lives around addictions and bad habits. And it kind of came to me in the circle, and I said, I've had my fair share of bad habits over the years, but if I really actually had to say the thing that I've been addicted to that has done the most harm in my life, it's been when I've been addicted to ideas and stories about who I am and what I deserve, what I'm worthy of, what's possible in life. Those are actually some of the most dangerous addictions you can have. Not to a drug, not to sex, but to the idea you have of your life and who you are. And so for me, one of the ideas I think I was unfortunately addicted to, I alluded to this a little bit earlier in the conversation, was just that sort of that like myth of the starving artist. That again, if you pursue what you love, there is that the world does not support truly creative people. The world crushes truly creative people. That was a myth, and that if you're going to really pursue what you love, well, you're not going to make much money at it. You're probably going to be driven into mental illness, and addiction. Think of, very well as a musician, like that 27 club of all the wonderfully talented, beautiful musicians that died at 27. That's our cultural stereotype of the creative genius, is drug addicted and broke and dead young.
Right.
And so to believe the idea that I could be a creative person, a spiritual person who's healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy, financially healthy, that was all possible, that I could start a business around spirituality, that I could, make money as a poet, for God's sakes. All of that seemed impossible at 25. But that is, at 35, that's my life. All those things that seem so impossible are my reality now. And it's not because I'm some just incredibly, remarkably talented, amazing person. I'm just a normal human being with a few interesting talents and a few interesting passions. But I would actually say, in terms of like a practical piece of advice, part of this is that if you are creative, if you are spiritual, to begin embracing the business side of all of this, to understand that not only can you make a livelihood out of this, it's actually a lot of fun too, to have your own business. And because isn't that what so many of us want, is to not have like some 9-to-5 kind of office you got to show up at. I mean, I work from my home. I have a beautiful house that I own in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. I'm my own boss. I set my own hours. If I want to sleep in, I sleep in. If I want to wake up early, I wake up early. But that took getting over my fear and my aversion to money. I think there's, again, sort of a myth that, well, if you're creative and you've made a lot of money, then you're a sellout. If you're spiritual and you make a lot of money, particularly if you're like some sort of spiritual teacher or you do some sort of healing and you make a lot of money, well, you must be a fraud. You must be taking advantage of people. You must be some sort of shady guru kind of person. We have a lot of cultural myths around creative, spiritual people and money. There's a lot of money shadow stuff. And I would say, if you're a creative, spiritual person, look at your relationship to money, because that could be a ticket to you doing what you love in a way that's you're free, you're healthy, you're sustainable. But you got to get over a little bit of that, perhaps that fear of seeing yourself as an entrepreneur, business kind of person, because that's kind of a dirty word, among some kind of artists and, that type of person. But no, to be able to handle your business is freedom. Mm-hmm. It's freedom.
Mm-hmm. So was it mostly a fact of just doing it and just like pushing through that? Like, were there any moments or chapters or maybe a person in particular that kind of helped break through some of those limiting beliefs? I know you're big on meditation and just your own practices, but I guess actually starting your own business, which I'm sure so many people want to, as I'm doing more of it myself, being my own boss.
Yeah.
And financial beliefs is something I know personally, present moment of this video, that's one of my biggest roadblocks in uncovering the abundance and knowing that abundance exists, but actually applying it and trusting it and allowing the giving and receiving, adding value and having containers to actually have a course that is valuable. When I pay you for coaching or whoever for value, it's not just, yes, you may enjoy it and get and learn things and love what you do, but you want to be able to continue doing it. So you actually need the funds to continue to do so. So
right.
What's that bring up for you on the financial front there?
Yeah, well, I'll start off by saying that there is a piece of it that's just do it. That is just sometimes you have to. Sometimes dipping your toe in on the shallow end of the pool is not enough. Sometimes you really just do have to just hold your breath and dive into the deep end. And that was, a certain extent of what I did. My first foray into coaching, it did evolve over time. Right when I left my English teaching job, I was also somewhat known as a writer in Charleston, and I started kind of figuring out this coaching thing. I saw these people doing coaching, like health coaching, nutrition coaching, spiritual coaching. And, I knew in my heart that ultimately where I wanted to go was in a spiritual direction. But still had some fear, still had some doubts. So I was like, well, what's a niche I could have for myself? And I was like, well, I've been an English teacher. I write, I hang out with a lot of writers. I'll be a writing coach. I'll help people with editing. I'll help people write books. And I really loved that. I still do a little bit of that work. It's definitely gotten smaller as my attention towards a path to call your own and life coaching and meditation and spirituality has picked up. But I just dived into that. I did it really full time for about a year. And I'll be honest, I had some tough, actually. I was pretty broke some days, I wasn't a starving artist, but I'll put it this way. I definitely ate some really sad meals. Like when you're eating like oatmeal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like things are a little like, whew.
Right. Right.
Or ramen or just, rice or, I was just barely getting by. And I did eventually over time learn to do a few things a little smarter. I did actually pick up like a part-time job at a bookstore that gave me a little bit of structure, a little extra money, but strategically it was a bookstore. It put me in touch constantly with a lot of writers, so there is in this world of entrepreneurship, like if particularly somebody's thinking about maybe making a transition from maybe like a traditional job to, going out on their own, starting something on their own, there is this term of called like a bridge job, meaning that, let's say you have a job that's just taking up all your time, it's your whole life and you're dying to get out of it, maybe finding something that's, part-time, a little calmer, something that's just bringing a little money in for you, but it's still giving you the time to work on your music, make a business plan, whatever the real true passion thing is. So you can be strategic here. And it took me about a year to actually admit to myself that at that point in my life, I did actually need like a little part-time something just to, help make rent. But I passed through that phase. I have no part-time job anymore. It's 100% life coaching and meditation and writing and podcasting for me now. So I feel so blessed around that. Ooh. But the second piece is to get support and get, I think we all need mentors. I think we all need people in our lives, whether they're therapists, a spiritual teacher, a life coach, a business coach, in a time when I was really setting up what my life is right now, like as I was still in Charleston, South Carolina, but I was gearing up for this move to Asheville. I was gearing up to build a path to call your own. Man, I was working with a therapist, and a life coach at the same time. Therapist was helping me deal with some past stuff that I still really needed to deal with. But that life coach that I was working with, we were really looking forwards and, helping me develop that vision for what I wanted my life to look like. And for me, it was being a life coach myself. So I also got some great mentoring on like what great life coaching looks like. So, and I'm constantly receiving, calling in support. I'm working one-on-one with a business coach right now. I have two, kind of support groups. A group of guys I actually just met with this morning that do different kinds of business. We have sort of an entrepreneurial weekly check-in Zoom time. I'm in another kind of group like that, two women who are both coaches. And every Wednesday night, I'm a part of a spiritual conscious men's organization called the Mankind Project. And so every Wednesday night I sit with about 10 guys and we hold each other accountable around just being the most conscious men we can be. And so, man, almost, 3-4 times a week, I'm checking in with people who are seeing the best version of myself and they're holding me to that, So, so that's just the big piece is just like, do not be afraid to get support. Do not be afraid to get help. Mentorship to me, and again, it can come in so many different forms, but particularly having some one-on-one mentorship from somebody who has some of the wisdom you're looking for. They're embodying something you really want to embody too. That's just priceless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Asking for help is so tough. I know for me personally, maybe different for others.
Yeah.
And when I think back to certain chapters of my life, when it's so obvious in hindsight to look back of like, that would have been a really good chapter to like one call to the Matthew Foleys of the world, or someone you can see within your mutual friends, that just one conversation of like, hey, like I'm kind of stuck, just that to get the sludge moving a bit. Cause you can really hide a bit in that 9 to 5 or hide in your old routine ways. And if there's not something to shake things up a bit, it could just get stagnant.
Yeah. And, particularly having, someone that can be kind of objective for you. I mean, when I look back on that kind of mid-20s time that I was talking about earlier, the main person that I would kind of talk things through was my partner, my girlfriend at the time. And, but I think we all should know that, like, asking our romantic partner to be our therapist, to be our accountability person, that's, you're already demanding a lot from that connection.
Right.
And it's just, but I think that's a tricky thing, when we, sometimes in high school and college, it's sometimes there's perhaps maybe easier access to mentorship. I know, like, sports was a part of, like, big part of your youth, and, you have coaches, you have, like, there's people that are those kind of figures. And I think sometimes what happens, I think this is probably a big part of that, like, quarter life crisis of, like, you're 25 and you don't know what the fuck's going on with yourself, is that I think it's very common to hit 25, you're out of college, you don't have that support network that maybe you're familiar with. Yeah, maybe you got a job, maybe you got a boss, maybe you got friends, maybe you got a romantic partner, but those are probably not the people you need to go, hey, let's really talk honestly. Like, I'm confused. I want some serious support and accountability. Like, you're probably not going to go to your boss for that. And you probably don't need to go to your girlfriend or your boyfriend for that. And so it's really important to have some people that, again, I think a one-on-one relationship with someone who has a kind of objective outlook on your life, who can talk to you honestly, but also be really empathetic. It's pretty priceless. And I think there's a lot of people in their 20s that don't have that. So
true. And there's like the financial beliefs may come up for people, like, oh, I can't spend that $100, $200, $300 on that right now, or like massage or whatever it is. Like, even though the reward could be infinitely greater, there's still just not even that starting place. But what do you think, man? Would you like to maybe share or transition to sharing a poem or something, or some writing?
Yeah,
I'd love
absolutely.
to hear a little bit, some of the poet energy from Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely. I got something I think to be perfect for this moment. I'll talk about it as I'm just pulling it up real quick. I already got the doc open. So this was something cool from the last week that I was up to. So our very, very awesome mutual friend, Raven McKevlin, was visiting me up here in Asheville. We were, so Raven is a filmmaker, makes some really beautiful movies and, short films. And I had always had this vision of doing like a very artistic, video for one of my poems. I have some, videos up on YouTube of like me reading a poem in a coffee shop, and, the espresso machines going off in the background, and, those kinds of things. But I always wanted to have basically like, like a music video for one of my poems. Cause I love to read poems aloud. I did sort of like spoken word slam poetry for a long time. So I love the the art of a poem being read aloud. And I just always wanted like a cool video with some awesome music to go with it. So thanks to Raven, and then you are going to be doing the music for it pretty soon. So this the poem I'd like to read is the poem that video is going to be based on, and yeah, it's really perfect for this conversation. So the poem is entitled "Where Your Soul Belongs." And I wrote it when I was very much in a time of transition. I was still living in Charleston, but I had really decided that Asheville was the place I wanted to be, and and not just geographically, but that's where I really felt like I could build, the life I wanted, that and the life I began envisioning for myself up here. Again, life coach and teaching meditation and spirituality and all those things, that's really where that's the life where my soul belongs, And I remember I was coming up here to Asheville quite a bit, starting to like look at houses, trying to like just figure out where I could live and just getting some details down. And I went out for a hike, and just the words of this poem started to come. And it was just what was really deeply on my heart. And it just, I think it speaks a lot about just finding your place in this world. Again, not just geographically, not just what town you live in, but finding your place in the universe, and what you do and what kind of life you live. So I'll stop talking about the poem and I'll just read it. I'm going to get a sip of water and then we'll dive right in.
I love it. It's so good. Real to share one small thing, like watching this Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix that's been blowing up. He retired from the NBA being the best player early to go play baseball. And although he's like pretty good, decent, obviously one of the greatest athletes to walk earth as far as we can tell. Yeah. But, it's not quite his place. And although he could make a sort of a name for himself in baseball, it's like you excel here. Like here's where all of your gifts and mindset and skills and just everything is aligning and flow state to the max. So Asheville might have been that place for you that was just calling you to and combine it all.
I had a good life in Charleston. I had a good life as a teacher, but there is a difference between good and great. And, we have to kind of know the difference. And the life that I have here now in Asheville, doing everything that I do with the path to call your own, this is the great life that I was craving. So, here's the poem.
I'm ready. Sounds great.
So where your soul belongs. I know you've heard it all the days of your life. A voice quietly calling, a song for your ears alone. Over and over again, it has called your name, pulled you like the moon calls home the tide. It has drawn you to the quiet places, to green woods and rushing rivers, to holy mountains and deep solitude. Only in that silence can you hear what it has to teach. Like birds' song on the wind, it whispers, you are free to leave behind all that has become too heavy for your heart. I know you are scared to unclench your hands and finally let go. You may lose much, my friend, maybe everything on the way to your soul. But the caterpillar knows the cocoon means death, the end of everything it once was. You must die to every life not meant for you if you want to birth a butterfly. You must die to every life not meant for you if you want to birth a butterfly. Your wings await you across the river and through the trees to that far country where the voice has always called you. May you follow it, wherever it may lead. May you follow it to the place where your soul belongs. That is the poem.
Thank you. When did you get into writing poetry specifically? I know we've touched on the profound moment at 25 and combining these things, but was poetry something kind of before that?
Yeah. Really started back in high school. Like with a lot of things, sometimes it takes some suffering to bring out our gold. My parents went through a divorce when I was 14. And that just brought up a lot of stuff, just entered high school, teenage years, puberty, parents are getting divorced, things were just kind of a mess. And, I really had not been much of a creative person up to that point. I was like in middle school, I kind of was just like typical boy. I was into sports and video games and pro wrestling. And, I like to read, but, it's not like I really did anything. I didn't really produce anything creative. What it really was, and you might get a little laugh out of this, is that, my first, real artistic pull was really towards music. I mean, I just, fell in love with, certain bands and, that just became my life, like just the bands I loved. I hit high school like in the late 90s and, still like a lot of the music of the 90s, like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, some of those like 90s bands were like still, that's what I first really gravitated to. And so my initial artistic dream was I really wanted to be a musician, songwriter, singer. But I just discovered I just had so little talent for it. I mean, I got a guitar and I tried to start learning and I just struggled like so much. And I know, John, you'd say everyone can be a singer, and and I know that's true. But what happened for me was that, but I was interested in songwriting, and so I started, trying to write songs, but I had no musical sense. I didn't really know what a melody was, but I got into just sort of writing song lyrics. And I guess probably just someday it dawned on me, as I was maybe in English class and we're studying poetry, where I, kind of had this moment where I was like, wait a second, like if you just take song lyrics and just don't worry about the music, well, it's basically a poem. So maybe I'm supposed to be a poet,
That's awesome.
So, but I think that was really my draw towards why I really love reading poems aloud. And, I really got into, for a lot of years, every week I was at some coffee shop performing poems, doing poetry slams. It's still the part of me that wants to be a lead singer in a rock band, It's my version of that.
Everyone wants that somehow, I feel like. But I mean, even poetry is very musical with rhythm and the tone
100%.
and like all the inner work that you've done over your life, that contributes to like when I close my eyes and just listen to you share that poem and the birds and whispering through the wind, like it's like it's a movie, it's a musical. It's all of it.
Yeah. I mean, all great writing, I think, has that sense of like a rhythm and a, that just a certain musical quality to it. But poetry is that times 100. I mean, what really distinguishes like a nonfiction writer, or a journalist from a poet is a poet is very concerned with the music and the sound of it, and it's absolutely musical. I really think that I think deep in our history, if you go back to early hunter-gatherer life, there really was not very much of a difference between, like the village shaman, storyteller, healer. They were all really like one role. You were the keeper of the myths.
Mm-hmm.
You were a healer, you were a storyteller, you were a guide. All of that really, and as I've kind of looked through the history of religion and that sort of stuff, all that spirituality, healing, creativity, storytelling, it all kind of flows. I think it's like comes out of one big river. And then like in our modern culture, we split it up into all these different things. But I think they really have a very similar root, and I think that's why like creativity and spirituality just go hand in hand so often, because they're fundamentally not separate.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really separate.
It almost sounds like an archetype that's being described.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
I was perusing through your website that's newly updated, which looks spiffy, by the way, looking groovy. And I saw one of your poems on the magician and the idea of the archetype behind it, which how all those things you're mentioning may overlap more than we think.
That is pretty, I think that archetype that could go by a lot of different names. I mean, that particular term, the magician, really comes up. I know you did a video a few days ago recommending good books. There's a great book on conscious masculinity that talks about 4 different archetypes of the mature, like divine masculine. And it's called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. That's the title of the book. And those are the 4 archetypes. And that archetype of the magician, it's also, it's the shaman, it's the healer, it's and it's also the mentor, it's Gandalf, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's Professor Dumbledore, it's Morpheus from the Matrix. It's the wise man or woman, who's the keeper of deep knowledge. They guide heroes on their hero journey. And they are the bridge to the spirit world, all of those things, there is a deep archetype, I think, in the human spirit and the human psyche of that figure. It's 100% in each of us, it's our own inner guru, inner teacher. It's there for sure.
I love archetypes. I think humans, I find it so fascinating how we can notice patterns like that, the pattern recognition, although they literally don't look the same, but symbolically we can see things and compare things similarly. I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah. It's funny. I figured we might at some point have a little conversation about books, and I'm in my office, and you can probably see a lot of books behind me. But one of my all-time favorites is Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is a deep dive on, obviously the archetype of the hero, of that part of us that sets out into the unknown. We, anytime that we leave that which is familiar to us and we go into the unknown and we bring back some kind of, we confront something that we fear and we bring back something of value. It's that story, that was something that was just such a continual like light bulb moment for me going through this book and studying it over the years. It's like throughout so many different cultures and times and different religions and different cultures, as different as the human race has been, and we tend to focus so much on our differences, one of the things that is so common to the human spirit is these stories and these archetypes. It's truly one of the things that threads together the human experience. And that's what Joseph Campbell was really passionate about, was bringing forward these myths and showing how they're all similar to, he thought of it as just sort of like this great symphony of what it is to be a human being. It's sort of our one great story, our one great religion that we tell in 1,000 different ways and we practice in 1,000,000 different ways, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's really one. Joseph Campbell loved to quote this line from the Upanishads that says that truth is one, but the sages call it by many names. And that's such a beautiful thing to remember, as we're navigating this world where there are so many differences, there are so many different truths, but those are just the different names, and truth is always one. It's a good thing to remember.
Silence. I'm really starting to fall more in love with silence. I'm doing my best to honor it more recently. It's so good. So who inspires you recently, as far as like, aside from maybe a book right now, like out in the real world, is there like a mentor or an archetypal figure that you're modeling certain behaviors after right now? Whether it be a creative or coach?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of levels to that. On a practical day-to-day level, I'm very inspired by this work I do with the Mankind Project. I just think I think that's just one of the great questions of our time right now in 2020 is definitely, thinking mindfully about gender and masculine and feminine and obviously creating a world where women and girls can be safe and free and living amazing lives. But I feel really drawn. I feel like my part in making this world a better place is to, really look closely at being a man and taking a really good hard look at masculinity and bringing forth the best parts of the masculine, which is something I feel like, I'm definitely a big believer that, within each of us, there is both masculine and feminine. Have been so lucky, I feel like in my life, to have a healthy access to the feminine. I wouldn't be a poet, for Christ's sake, if I, couldn't access that realm of like emotion and empathy and compassion are so big for me. Mm-hmm. But there are qualities of the masculine that are necessary and beautiful. And as I've gotten more in touch with them, and I have this network of men that really support that work, it's been so transformative for me. And I can just tell that it's already spread to, like the relationships with, women in my life. I feel like I can show up for them in a better way. So that was a little, just a bit of a tangent, but just saying that group of men that I sit with each week through the Mankind Project that's something that always just holds me super accountable. Really makes me want to show up as the best version of myself. But to really show up as the best version of as a man, I believe our true identity is spirit, is non-dual. But we do happen to find ourselves in a particular body. And, in this incarnation, I happen to be born as a male, as, this color skin in the United States of America. And I want to be accountable and aware and responsible for all of that. And so I just really believe wholeheartedly in this work of, just men stepping up to be aware of our actions, our responsibilities. And I just think that's something that could really do some good in the world if we just had a new generation of really conscious men.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole thing we could get into, but
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because like I think the unhealthy archetype of masculinity is the tyrannical,
yes,
overly aggressive, not integrated
yes,
energy that's just out to slaughter.
Yeah.
And obviously our history and heritage of humanity is just swamped in that. And we're getting better overall, it seems like, from a humanity perspective. Like there's a trend of more peace. I'm sure if we look back on time, peace is trending.
Yeah.
But we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I mentioned that book about those 4 masculine archetypes, and those are the king, warrior, magician, lover. Those are the light side, the positive aspect of those masculine archetypes, but each of them has a shadow that the book talks about. And it is like, it's the tyrant. It's the shadow of the warrior is just the violent aggressor. The shadow of the magician is like a manipulator, using wisdom to take advantage of people. The shadow of the lover is the addict. So yes. And I think the place to begin looking at those shadowy aspects of the masculine and the feminine as well is we really got to look within first. I mean, it's very easy to turn on the TV or, scroll through our phones and just be like, oh yeah, there's toxic masculinity right there in the White House. And that's true. But I think in my judgment, the most effective place to begin making change is really right here first. So, it's really looking at, the unhealthy masculine in myself and, unhealthy, feminine aspects of myself too, because there's everything has its shadow, and everything has its light. And so, yeah, but I think that's so much, I think the work of this moment. And I think there's so much good stuff out there to dig into around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has quarantine really opened up some new perspectives as far as like integrating some of those, whether it be more of the masculine or more of the feminine or some of both during this time? Like what's come up for you for this more solitude chapter and this chaos in the air?
I mean,
perhaps
that's a whole other great conversation. Yeah. I mean, this time of COVID and quarantine, what a strange time to be alive on planet Earth. I mean, personally for me and as I try to look out on the collective, I mean, there definitely are blessings and curses to it. Obviously there's a lot of folks out there that have had a really hard time with it. And, it's brought me my moments of some doubt and, but it has come with its blessings. So I want to just bring in what you kind of asked there around, sort of masculine and feminine, if that has a role in any of this. And I really like the conversation. I've had this with men and women around, what does masculine energy and feminine energy look like in, business and the creative life, and that's such an interesting balance to strike. I mean, I think we can think of, I think of course, one of the great feminine archetypes is the archetype of the mother, right? So, what does a mother do? Well, she within herself grows something beautiful and then releases out into the world. And it takes time, So that's a great reminder in our creative business lives that sometimes we have to, look within and let an idea grow, sometimes for something like 9 months before it's ready to come out, and then sometimes, the masculine energy in business and creativity is sometimes like charging forward, tapping into some good, positive warrior energy, discipline, getting the shit done, knocking your to-do list out. So yeah, it's been kind of an interesting time. I feel like I say it with humility, I feel like I've been blessed to have some good balance there, where it's been, quite a lot of insight, definitely blessed, trying to use the solitude mindfully of looking within, rethinking some things, recalibrating. But also when it's time to act and not hesitate. So I think that's been some of that balance there. But and I'll just say, one other blessing I really feel from quarantine time is really getting more comfortable with online community. Before when I was doing my podcast, I always was like way more in favor of doing podcasts in person. I really wanted to sit down with somebody. When I met with like my Mankind Project group, we met in person. I had a lot of stuff that was, in person, face to face. And then quarantine happened, COVID hit, and then suddenly, everything really needed to happen online. And I was really bummed out about that at first. I kind of took a little break from my podcast. I was like, do I really want to do everything on Zoom? And I just slowly over time got more comfortable with it. And now it's like, man, thank God for Zoom. Thank God for online communities. And just as an interesting example, this is a great just example of like reframing a limiting belief around business. I mentioned way earlier in the show that on Monday nights now, I host a online meditation group. We do it on Zoom. People just come from the comfort of their own living room. And I'm in my office or living room. And for so many years, I wanted to teach a meditation class. Literally, that was a dream since back like 25, that story I was telling. But, my thought was, that's probably I got to find a space and, maybe something like a yoga studio. And then I started meeting people that were yoga teachers or own yoga studios. And the story I kept getting was, meditation classes just don't really work. Just not enough people come. People really want the yoga because they get a workout too. Yoga is what makes money. Meditation teachers it just doesn't work. It doesn't really work. So I just had that limiting belief that like, I would love to teach meditation, but it's not practical. And then probably just like a month and a half ago, it just dawned on me. I was like, I should just teach a meditation class online, and like, I know that seems so simple, and it's just crazy that it took me a decade to realize that was possible. And I didn't need to worry about a space. I didn't need to worry about having a yoga studio's permission to do it. I could just do it, just offer it. And it's been great. I've been having usually around 10 people come every time. I really wanted to make it accessible. So I do it as just like a $5 or $10 donation, but people have been so generous. Everybody chips in a little bit. So, lo and behold, I went from teaching a meditation class as
It just paused for a second, so I missed the end of your sentence.
It was just phenomenal to find out that teaching a meditation class was possible. And it actually makes me, I hate to say it, grateful for quarantine, grateful for this crazy world that we're living in, while also acknowledging, the difficulties. So it's a mixed bag, but
I remember seeing posts on social media of this is the first time in history that we've been so removed and isolated, yet for the first time actually connected still, even though not in person. We are living through wild times. And what other poems or writing have been birthed during this time? Is there any related to that topic that might be worth mentioning or sharing?
I tell you what. The timing of doing the video and all of that is that I'm going to have a new poetry book coming out. It's going to be my fourth poetry collection. It's going to be called Mountain Medicine. So it's poems that I've written. Most of them were written over the last year or so. Some go back just a little further than that. But there was definitely a poem that I wrote right when quarantine was really going strong, and there was just a lot of fear in the air. And God only knows there still is a good amount of that. But for me, I was in a place where I guess a big part of my coaching work is definitely this just belief that the way forward when we're in times of challenge and difficulty is that we have to honor the whole experience. It's very tempting to just try to only focus on the positive. And there's a lot of value. Like God knows we need the positive, but we don't want to just sweep negative emotions under the rug. We don't want to just deny how we're feeling or how the world's feeling. I'm a big believer in let's honor it. Let's give everything a seat at the table. And then that's how we then mindfully move through these, deep emotions and these challenges in a conscious way. So I wrote a poem that's called A Heart to Hold It All. And that's really where that sense came from of like, how do I move through the world right now with a heart that acknowledges all of this, like the beauty and the pain and the opportunity and the challenges, the blessing, and just the tough times. It's all right there, and I want to be able to acknowledge all of it. So this is called A Heart to Hold It All. Not a day goes by now when I am not brought to my knees, buckled and broken wide open by the grief and glory of this world. This morning, I watched a mountain parting clouds like Moses split the sea. Later, the news tells me the end is near. Every headline is heartbreak. Every neighbor shuts their door. At night, the sky is a sea of candles, each burning wick a world I'll never see. If I said a prayer for every star I saw, would it be enough for God to listen? Never have I felt so small. Never have I felt a part of something so large. Give me a heart to hold it all. The fear that would break us, the love that will save us, the gift within the pain, and the pain within the gift. Give me hands to hold us all through the grief and glory of this world. Yeah, man.
I love creative works that really capture the vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild how fast things are changing right now. Mm-hmm. And there's all these opportunities to create if you are in a position to create. Mm-hmm. And I guess in my experience, reflecting back on my own creativity, it's like you kind of have to capture the vibe while you're experiencing it, while you're holding it and honoring it all. Yeah. Otherwise it'll pass and it's like a missed opportunity. Yeah. And I feel like right now, obviously, if you were to write the same poem with the same topic, the energy would be so different because that was written right in the midst of, I could feel like that brought me back to 2 months ago, just like, like we all, so many people on earth experience that moment.
Yeah. Of like, lots of heaviness, but also lots of hope. And I mean, that's just a big part of, what I feel like is my commitment to the spiritual life. I take a lot of inspiration from Buddhism, and, there's within Buddhism, there's really two really two fundamental qualities of enlightenment, that it's wisdom on the one hand and compassion on the other.
How do you define those words? I was talking to my partner about compassion the other day.
Did it pause a little bit again?
It just did.
Okay.
Yeah. Continue.
But yeah, wisdom and compassion. I think, there's I think what that looks like for me is like on the wisdom side, go within and, to meditate and to give some self-care. But then that compassion is also what opens me up to the world, that, I don't want to just be, for me, I don't want to have a peaceful life if it means just cutting myself off from the world. I believe in that big compassionate heart. So it's, for me, it's always kind of walking this fine line of, listen, there's days when I just don't want to watch the news. It's so overwhelming. I don't want to pay attention, but I try to mindfully engage with, what's happening, what's going on with my neighbors, what's happening here in Asheville, what's going on down in Charleston. There's that fine line, maintaining our inner peace, so crucial, but then also keeping our hearts open to the world. It's tricky sometimes. Sometimes I just want to do one or the other.
Right. It's
but
a dance.
Trying to do both.
Mm-hmm. Compassion, like how does the word compassion make you feel, like on a bodily level? Like I was talking to my partner about the word compassion, and like it's such a beautiful word, and I was trying to figure out how like other people besides myself define it. Like if someone's really embodying compassion, I can hear you sort of describing it's maybe the active piece of taking that wisdom, that inner work, and compassionately, like an active verb of implementing it and giving a bit attention to others. Yeah.
Well, in Buddhism, compassion is really closely aligned with, loving kindness. And I think that's I think certainly the way we show compassion, when we see the suffering of others, just to try to show up as best we can with a sense of loving compassion. But I think the interesting thing there is that, if you sort of break down the word compassion, it has some roots in the notion of suffering with, in a way.
Wow.
And there is that fine line to walk, when we really feel someone else's pain, there is a way in which we enter into that with them. But if we're going to help them, we can't just drown in the suffering with them, and I think that's something that's a constant thing. I feel it as a life coach. I think therapists, any kind of person that really you're setting out to help others, you have to be mindful around compassion. There is that, if we are going to be empathetic, you have to really be there, like with them, feeling it, but also protecting your own heart. It's a tricky thing to do, actually one of my favorite stories, from the Gospels. I grew up in the church, and that's one of the things I really honor, about a childhood growing up with the teachings of Jesus, is I think that sense of compassion was very strong for me as a kid. I think that's one of the things that really stood out when I was really young. Stories of how Jesus treated others, doesn't matter what their social standing is. Jesus had enormous amounts of compassion, but there's an interesting story. Do you happen to know, this is just sort of like a little fun piece of trivia. Do you happen to know the shortest sentence in the Bible? It's 2 words.
I am. I don't know.
It's Jesus wept, period. And there's a moment where Jesus weeps in the Bible, and it's when he goes to this village where Lazarus has just died. So a lot of people know the story of like Lazarus's resurrection. Jesus brings Lazarus back from the dead. But he goes into the village and he meets, I think it's Lazarus's mother and sister. And Lazarus has just died, and Jesus is with the family, and they're grieving. Now, here's why I think it's interesting, is that let's suppose Jesus knew that he was able to bring Lazarus back from the dead. He knew he was capable of healing the situation that was causing them pain, right? But he still stopped and cried with them. Even though he could fix the problem, he still took the time to be with them in their pain. And I think that's such a beautiful model, for just healers and just, anyone who's out to help others, that we can find that balance. We can bring our healing and yet we can also be with others and in their suffering, but not get overwhelmed by it. There's such an interesting balance to bring. But I love the idea that, the Son of God took time to grieve, and mourn with people that were in pain.
Yeah, honoring that process.
Yes, honoring the process, not just trying to all right,
I know you're crying. I get it. You're really upset, but here, it's fixed. It's but there's still that process. Yeah.
It's honoring the process. And I think that's such a great just example of just how to navigate all of that, because so often we want to just, if we see a friend in pain, we just want to give them advice, here's how to fix it.
Let's skip over this. Let's just get to, here's the solution.
Yeah. And sometimes what people just so deeply want is just someone to listen to them and just hold them and just, cry with them for a moment. That too is a part of the healing process.
Right.
So, I don't know how we got there. Asking about compassion.
It reminded me somewhere along the line there of Jordan Peterson describing a story about the lifeguard, which I guess one of the practices of becoming a lifeguard is you approach someone who may be drowning with your feet first. And I was like, why would that be the case? And Jordan Peterson described that as, it's as the lifeguard, you signed up to embody this compassion. I want to go save people, but there is a little bit of condition there of hey, if I'm going to save you, you can't drown me and then we both die. Yeah. There has to be some form of cooperation there where we're honoring that process, but it's not a lose-lose. At the best case scenario, it's
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Buddhism, the Buddhist term for that is skillful means. That when we set out upon a mission to, help others, to show compassion, it's we need to find the wise, skillful means to do that. And yes, the lifeguard drowning in the process of trying to save someone doesn't help either person.
Right. Lose-lose.
Yeah, that's a lose-lose. And so if we want to get to a win-win in the name of compassion, that also means taking care of ourselves along with being with the person we're trying to help. So this is a really rich subject. I think that, and I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan as well. So I always love his insights.
What are some of your go-to habits, or what's working for you right now in your flow right now, as we speak, in the last week or so, has there been a go-to activity or moment?
Yeah. Well, I know we dived into the topic of, a morning practice and a morning routine when you were the guest on my podcast. And so, I also am a big believer in that morning routine. And there's a few things that on a good day, I try to hit pretty consistently. Not every day is super consistent, but actually, a lot of the things were pretty similar. You gave your list of some of those essential ingredients, and they're very similar to mine. Definitely meditation. I've been on a big kick of. There's a meditation teacher named Tara Brach. She's runs a meditation community out of Washington, D.C. And I think if we can agree, if you're practicing peacefulness in Washington, D.C., you might know what you're talking about. that's a difficult job. So she's got a lot of, it's kind of rooted in insight meditation. She's also has a PhD in psychology, so like really grounded stuff. So I have an audiobook of her meditations that I've been listening to. Definitely yoga, definitely writing. My writing tech or practice recently is so I very much consider it my mission in life right now to serve spiritual seekers. So I'm trying to get clear, every day, just within myself and thinking about who I'm trying to reach, just getting clear on like, okay, what do spiritual seekers need in 2020? So I started this journaling prompt that I call Dear Spiritual Seeker, where I just sort of write a letter every morning, most mornings, to the spiritual seeker inside of myself and that I see out in the world, just trying to address, obstacles and pitfalls. And sometimes I'll write out a question, like from the part of myself that's still really searching and struggling. I'll like write out a question, and then I'll breathe and I'll tap into the wiser, calmer part of myself, and I'll do my best to answer it, and some pretty interesting things come out, that like some wisdom that doesn't even feel like it's coming from my ego. The ego part of me is like, but what, but why? And like, but how do I do it? And there's a deeper part of me that's like, no, you know what to do. You've got it. So I just tap into that part. And so that's actually going to become, I hope, a kind of blog series, that might turn into a book or something like that. But yeah, so Dear Spiritual Seeker is a kind of a recent writing practice.
Wow. And then I love that.
And then definitely reading. I got a big stack of books right now. I'm working through a lot of stuff on meditation and Buddhism and mythology and, but yeah, yoga, I mentioned yoga a second ago, but yeah, usually some kind of movement, if I can get out and sweat, go out for a hike or just something. And probably the final piece off of that is being out in nature, even if it's just going out into my porch. I'm really blessed with a great view of Mount Pisgah here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So just sometimes going outside and just standing there, breathing in the fresh mountain air and looking out in the mountains is good medicine. That's what I'm calling my book, Mountain Medicine, because that's what I'm lucky to experience every day.
I'm stoked for this video with Raven to come along.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be sweet with how many people, myself included, seeking that kind of content of just, I love listening to inspirational YouTube videos is essentially a daily thing of mine, just like a little chapter of usually in the morning time of just gathering inspiration and new ideas and listening to meditations or a speech or something creative, like a just beautiful backdrop, nature sounds, like whatever it is. And that kind of content, I just eat up like the dollar menu that's on YouTube.
But it's a little more nourishing than the actual dollar menu. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. We got some great footage of, a lot of good nature, sunsets and waterfalls and all that kinds of good stuff. So with your help and maybe the people watching this, you can help this video go viral, and it'll probably be out. And I'd probably say in about a month, I feel like is a safe bet, probably end of August.
So like, I love that spiritual seeker writing prompt idea. That's so sweet. Like in your recent coaching, has there been any certain themes or trends of what a spiritual seeker you think is really lacking or craving or looking for right now? Like what obstacles from your perspective seem to be popping up? If you're seeing any trends, like, I don't know, just caring what other people think or but limiting beliefs. Particularly financial.
That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you something that's been coming up, and this was just I was actually taking one of those early just morning drafts and cleaning it up and getting ready to put it out in an essay. And one of the things I was writing about there, and I see this is, it's like, what does it mean to be, awake, and or even what does it mean to be enlightened in, such a chaotic kind of time? I think we so associate that if I was enlightened, I would just be peaceful, like just all the time, and just perfect love, perfect peace.
Yep.
And and the fact of the matter is life is a lot messier than that. The world's in a much messier place. And just even within the boundaries of our own skin, things are messy. Life has a way of being complicated. And so one of the things I was writing about is that enlightenment happens only in the middle of the mess. That if you're waiting for your life to get totally figured out, everything easy, everything smooth, you got all the money in the bank you could ever want, and just, waiting for all the externals to get figured out to then be, oh, now I can feel enlightened, or now I could just feel a little bit of peace. But that actually the work of the spiritual life is finding those moments of peace and awakening in the midst of the ups and downs of life, and just giving ourselves lots of grace, giving ourselves the ability to, again, coming back to like honoring the full human experience. I think enlightened people can also feel some anger and feel depressed and be worried about the state of the world. But I think what makes for an enlightened perspective or an awakened perspective is that you're able to meet all of those moments with kindness and some grace. You encounter what is with some kindness and compassion, and it's not about wanting the moment to just change and be perfect so that you can finally feel at peace. It's bringing your peace to the moment. And God only knows the world needs some of that right now. And so what I was writing about was just, we need awakened people, or just people on the way to awakening, to, enter in fully to just the messiness of the world. We need people to show up. We need people to reach out to others. And, we don't just need to just disappear into our little caves of solitude. We need to be fully in the world. And so the title that I have for that essay is Fully Human and Fully Awake. And for me, I think that's the challenge of this moment, is being both fully human in all of its complexity and fully awake. And those two things are not actually opposites. To be awake, to be Buddhas, to be conscious doesn't mean we throw out our humanity. Doesn't mean we throw out our anger or our sexuality or any of that. We can be fully human and we can be awake at the same time. So that is something I'm just seeing. That's my work right now as a spiritual seeker. And I have a feeling that if it speaks to me, it probably speaks to someone else too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel called to quickly just say a quick thank you again. Like, all your posts and quotes, and literally now me experiencing your coaching is all positively affecting my life. And when I think of like the gurus or the spiritual awakened ones of the world, or that are on that path that actually want to help like you do, like some may choose to go off into the caves, which that's might be exactly their calling. And an example that just came up was Shetty, who was a monk and has sort of brought back his teachings and learnings and wisdom to social media, and his intention of making wisdom go viral. I remember in the midst of quarantine, he decided to do a live meditation for like a week or something every day at a certain time. And I tuned in for one of them, and it was like 40,000 people live with Jay Shetty meditating. And I'm like, wow, like from being in a cave to now 40,000 people being affected with this type of energy of this soft, beautiful music, and him guiding people through this inner body awareness scan. There's chaos going on everywhere else on social media, but he's just 40,000. I'm like, wow, that's incredible that you can take all that. And we have these tools now, like Zoom, like all these things that, and I see you doing that with your content. We've never even met in person, and you're impacting my life. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, the time in the cave is important. That's something I think we have to honor on our spiritual journey. There are times to retreat, go really within, but then I think there's times to bring it out into the world, to bring the cave to Instagram, to integrate the two, or bring the Instagram to the cave, one way or the other, or YouTube, whatever it might be.
Bro.
Yeah, man.
You got some great stuff on the walls back there.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time trying to decorate this office. This is where I do, almost all my coaching work and meditation classes. So it's a good reminder to be my best self. So yeah.
Well, what do you think, dude? I'm thinking, is there one other poem you might want to share at this moment? Is there another offering, or
let's see.
Want me to ask another question? I want to send you out with an inspirational bang for the rest of today.
Yeah. Okay. Let me end with one more poem. This is a slightly shorter one. But I think it's a good message. So,
Cool.
So my coaching business, is a path to call your own. And, I've just always loved those metaphors of your path, your journey. Even though it's not like there's a destination out there somewhere we're trying to get to, the destination is actually right here, but, but I do love, just as a poet, I love the metaphor of, the path, the journey. And, so this is, a fairly simple poem, but I think a powerful one that's going to be in the book. So this is called All You Need on Your Journey Now. And I offer this as just I offer this as a blessing to anybody who is watching right now. Up ahead and through the trees, a path is calling you. You know the one. It leads to where the wildflowers grow, where mountains are as blue as the sky and the sun shines its face on yours. At your feet, a bag is packed with unworthiness and doubt. Leave it behind. Leave it all behind. All you need on your journey now is your soul to guide you and your feet to carry you on. Hope that was some good medicine, a good blessing for everybody.
Thank you so much, man. I love that one. We can't bring all these attachments with us on this journey. Maybe temporarily, but not permanently.
Yeah.
And I love how you introduced that poem, saying for anybody listening right now, because I've been thinking about, like, while creating content or conversations like this, whenever someone may watch it, it's always right now. It's not like, you watch it later. It's like, no, you're actually watching it right now. And you're like, it just hit me. Well, I could see somebody watching this in the future. And they're like, oh, it's right now. He's really sharing it with me right now, which you are. So thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I do have one more question.
Okay, hit me.
And it's sort of in that same light. If you were to watch this back and this makes it to the web, and it's your future self, what advice might you give from the self you are now, where you're at, what you're feeling, what you're going through? What seed or little tidbit of advice might you want to share or throw out into the universe to that future self that might glance upon this later?
Yeah. It's funny. I did a very similar exercise once like this. I did a weekend retreat with this Mankind Project organization. It was a very profound, it's really designed to be like an initiation ceremony into real mature masculinity. And we were kind of coming to the end of the weekend. I mean, every guy's head, including mine, was just full of a lot of inspiration, all these like new insights. And they had us all sit down and write a letter to ourselves. We put it in an envelope, sealed it up, and we said, we're going to mail this to you in 6 months. And 6 months went by, and I just opened up my mailbox one day, and I was like, it was addressed to me, but it was like, but that's my handwriting though. Like, what the hell is this? And I was like, oh, this is my letter from the weekend where I wrote to my future self.
I have a twin.
Yeah. I really was, I didn't know what was going on for like just a few seconds, but, the thing I think I said in there was this theme of remembering that it's not so much like when I look back on my life journey, I mean, there's definitely been lots of, new insights and new things that I've learned, but more of the work has really been remembering the truths that I've known all along. The fundamental truths that I live my life by. I knew what they were at 25. I knew what they were at 15. I knew what they were at 5 years old. And there's always growth. There's always progress. But I think sometimes, we can sometimes get caught up in trying to learn this new meditation technique, or, I want to study this new thing or new knowledge. But sometimes the most potent stuff we can do is just to come back to remember who we really are. And so, if future Matthew Foley is watching this video right now in 6 months, Matt, remember who you are. And John, when you're watching this 6 months from now, John, remember who you are. Remember who you are, who you've always been. And that's something divine and sacred and holy with a huge gift to give this world. And that's also what I would just say to anybody watching right now. That is also the truth about you. And I hope you remember who you are and why you're here. Yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
this
brother.
This has been so lovely. And to anyone watching, thanks for tuning in. And to both of us and to anybody watching, let's go have a great rest of the day or night.
Yeah.
And do it again tomorrow.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure being on here. And let's keep these good conversations rolling. And I'll just add, if anybody wants to stay in touch with me, all my stuff online is under A Path to Call Your Own. So apathtocallyourown.com, A Path to Call Your Own on Instagram. So if anybody's interested in that Finding Purpose course, reach out. And Mountain Medicine, the new poetry book. If you like those poems, the new poetry book will be coming out. It's just slightly in the flow, up in the air, but my guess is the next month or two. Mm-hmm. So lots of good things coming.
Man, Matthew, thank you again. The Field of Dreams quote just came up for me saying, if you build it, they will come. And I feel like they're finding you, how I've found you, and you've impacted my life. So I foresee good things. So thanks for doing the work and making it happen.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for that blessing. Yeah. Sending it right back to you.
All right. Farewell, everybody. And Matthew, we'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.